Welcome to Legally Everywhere, where we are what?
Because we almost done. Aren't y'all excited about this good old data? Right? So 21 directly matched to MOUs. We had when you expand it out to see what about the surrounding area, that county that it's associated with, there was an extra 10, which put us a total of 31, which means there was no overlap for 172 of what I was able to do an analysis on. What I did an analysis on is not the full 3,000. It was the sample size that I have, which is the information that was accessible to me, that's accessible to the general public, right? And met the metrics of what being verifiable in the public. Okay, within the 24-hour period for which all this just happened. Okay, I also did a direct analysis, which I didn't add in the methodology, but I'm explaining here. When we say how did I compare the the MOAs? Okay, so I went onto ICE's. I hate the way that sounds, but I went onto the ICE website and I pulled their participating agency document. Right, I pulled that PDF, and I was able to use that as a template to map up against the cities and states that I was able to verify. And that's how I came up with this data. That would be critical information for you to know if you were to try to do this on your own. Okay, so you did get the geographical overlap. You're able to see that when it comes to this information, which I thought was pretty significant. I think it's significant that the MOAs existed in so many of those places. Even like, oh, 20 is not that much. 20 is still 20, right? I don't want to make any causality type of claims. Like, I don't want to say because this happens is causation, right? I don't want to do that because it's not my position to do or my place to do at this particular juncture. What I will say is patterns are patterns. I find it very interesting information. And when you're coordinating these kind of events, keep things like this in mind, right? Keep things like this in mind. We live in a very interesting time. We've seen a lot of interesting things relevant to freedom of speech. We talked about how freedom of speech is indexed in Project 25. We've seen how some of the executive orders have been written out relevant to freedom of speech. We've seen the actions, right? We've seen what people write, what people say, what they recommend. We also see the actual action, right? So when planning certain kinds of events, I just always say try to be cognizant of as many factors as you can for the safety of everyone that is there. Luckily, I've not heard anything that gives me pause, but I just wanted to make sure that, you know, as I do this kind of work, as I share these perspectives, thoughts that I might have, things I look in, things I'm like, ooh, I'm biting all into this. This is delicious. It's delectable. Um, there are various ways that we can go about advocacy. This is just one way that I do it, that I try to support the overall community, just by sharing viewpoints and information that I come across, right? I also think transparency is the utmost. What are the limitations to what I presented, right? I can't present causation and causality because I can't really do that at this present juncture, right? Nor would I. Um, but I'm able to show patterns. I'm able to show that there some things exist at the same time. Sometimes certain things are in the same room at the same time, right? We talked about power dynamics, who's in the room, who's not in the room. Okay. Limitations. This is not a full data set, right? I did not get 3,000 locations and get to map them to see how much more overlap we could find, right? I wasn't able to do that. But what we saw was still relatively significant, relevant to the sample size that I did have and that I could collect, right? It's public data only, right? I'm very intentional about only giving you publicly accessible information, public data only, but that also is inherently a limitation because often when you are in certain advocacy circles, when you are engaged in protests, rallies, those kinds of, a lot of what you do is somewhat removed from public domain until it needs to immediately be put certain places. So certain information isn't going to be sitting overly outside. Um, until after the fact. Another reason why I wanted to make sure for safety reasons that if 24 hours had passed, And additionally, you know, like I wasn't just putting any old thing out here, right? Everything I read was very peaceful. And we want to make sure we keep all that there, right? But more importantly, I just wanted to make sure we did see there was quite a bit of overlapping that occurred, right? Like roughly 1 in 5, right? Because it was close to about 20%, so that's like 1 in 5. County expansion definitely mattered in that conversation. But it's not in my city. We didn't approve. Did your neighboring city approve it? Did they approve it? You know what I'm saying? Like in maybe your city did not approve it. Did your neighboring city approve it? If I was to go show you the ICE list, matter of fact, I think I might do that for a quick second, right? You would be very, very shocked that how many agreements actually exist, right? We saw that number and it doesn't feel like, oh, that's not that big a deal. Okay, well, we scroll through it and we look at one of them, maybe then it would feel a little bit more impactful. And it's all public, accessible information. Like I said in my video yesterday, it does look like that website got a little facelift, but because we already been into these receipts, we've been getting into these receipts for a minute. My first video dive in occurred in June of last year, relevant to some events that occurred here in Michigan. And I kind of just done updates here and there. All this information is accessible on the page. Right? There's a little bit of facelift. The content still looks the same, right? Some things are not as accessible, right? But for the most part, the content pretty much reads the same. But you almost want to have the buzz terms, right? Buzzwords. Because I'm giving you the language, you know what to look up, right? You know to put participating, agencies, you know to look up MOAs, right? You know the time frame, look it up. And I'm going to actually show you what one of them looks like since we might have a few more minutes here, right? Just for the sake of conversation, right? From what I could pull, 1 in 5 overlap. I don't want to pull it out of distortion, right? So we have to keep in mind that it's 1 in 5 had an overlap out of the 173 that I was able to extract that was public, that was accessible, that could be verified. And what was interesting, the number almost doubled when we did county expansion. So when you say, oh, it's not me and my friends, but it could be your neighbors, and that's still your community. So reasonably so, you'd be surprised how many places are really connected to you, your family, your loved ones, or just, in general, the people, right? There are lots of patterns that can be observed when we look. So I'm going to show y'all what my report looked like when I first did it. And I was like, let me bust this down to like a PowerPoint presentation to make it a little bit easier. Right. So just so you know, if you go look through these MOAs, you'll see that there were a lot in Texas, a lot in Florida, a lot in Pennsylvania.